Breaking news. 8 4-star generals have issued a stark warning to the Prime Minister, and now Britain's most elite soldiers are taking the government to court. The SAS Regimental Association is threatening legal action over legislation they say will weaken the nation's defenses. This is not a fringe protest. These are people who served in some of the deadliest counterterrorism operations in British history, and their message is clear. The Prime Minister either doesn't understand the consequences of his actions, or worse, he doesn't care. This is not simply a matter of a legal dispute. It is a direct challenge to how Britain treats the men and women who risk all to keep us safe, and one with implications that stretch far beyond Northern Ireland. Here's what happened, why the SAS is furious, and what this could mean for every serving member of the British military today. Want the truth behind the headlines politicians don't want you to hear? If so, hit subscribe now. We break down every move, hold power to account, and this story is far from over. You need to see how this ends. Labour has just repealed the Legacy Act, a controversial yet critical piece of legislation that until now protected veterans from prosecution for actions taken in the Troubles in Northern Ireland. For those who may not be aware, the Troubles consisted of 3 decades of sectarian violence, whereby the British soldiers and police encountered daily threats from IRA terrorists through bombings, assassinations, and ambushes. The Legacy Act was far from perfect. Critics labeled it an amnesty for wrongdoing. But for the soldiers who served under conditions that were often impossible, it provided one essential thing: closure. No more inquests, no more civil lawsuits, no waking up decades later to face investigation for a split-second decision made in 1978. Now, at least 9 inquests are reopening. Veterans in their 60 seconds and 70 seconds, men who followed orders and did their duty, could face prosecution for decisions made in their 20 seconds. In the fog of war, against an enemy that wore no uniforms and hid among civilians, Prime Minister Starmer insists there's nothing to worry about. Just last week, on a G20 trip to South Africa, he told reporters that there would be no vexatious prosecutions, that protections are in place, and that the system strikes the right balance. The SAS is unconvinced. So are the 8 retired 4-star generals, the Air Chief Marshal, and the Royal Ulster Constabulary veterans standing with them. The SAS Regimental Association said in a scathing statement that either Starmer has been poorly briefed or he is determined to accept, without question, a deeply flawed plan from the Northern Ireland office. Let's be clear. This is not polite disagreement. This is calling the Prime Minister either ignorant or willfully blind to dangers everyone else can see. And the generals did not stop there. They invoked a principle every government should fear. The first duty of government is the defense of the realm. Their argument is devastatingly simple. If soldiers are told they could face prosecution decades later for doing their job, why would anyone volunteer for the hardest, most dangerous missions? How does exposing veterans to endless legal jeopardy make Britain safer, especially as the global security landscape darkens? This is not theoretical. Recruitment and retention in the British Armed Forces are already in trouble. Army numbers are below their target, and similar pressures are being felt by the Navy and the RAF. Now recruits are being warned, join up and serve your country. But be aware that in 50 years' time, the political winds may have changed and you could find yourself in court for carrying out orders. Who in their right mind would sign up on those terms? Former Lieutenant Colonel Simon Barry, who served with the Parachute Regiment during some of the darkest days of the Troubles, said bluntly that neither the veteran community nor the Royal Ulster Constabulary trusts Starmer's assurances, no matter what he or his party claim. Think about that. The Royal Ulster Constabulary, the police who face the same bombs, ambushes, and death threats, doesn't trust the government either. These aren't alarmists. These are people who made life or death decisions under unimaginable pressure. They know the difference between legal protection on paper and protection in practice, and they are saying it doesn't work. Barry went further, referring to the Republic of Ireland's involvement in such investigations as a betrayal of both IRA victims and UK national sovereignty. Let that sink in. British soldiers could face prosecution influenced by foreign government, the same nation which provided sanctuary to IRA operatives during the Trouble. This isn't about legal procedure. It's about who gets to judge British service personnel for protecting British citizens on British soil. One of the most damaging exchanges in Prime Minister's questions for Prime Minister Starmer was when he faced a question from Mark Francois, Conservative MP for Rayleigh and Wickford. For all his forensic skill as a lawyer, Starmer has never been a soldier. How can he know better than 8 retired 4-star generals, 1 Air Chief Marshal, and the SAS itself how to protect veterans? The chamber fell silent. Francois was not calling into question Starmer's intellect or his motives. He was calling into question his experiential authority, and to that, Starmer has no answer. His legal expertise, normally an asset, cuts against him here. This is not some abstract puzzle about legal rights. This is real-world consequence to real people who risked everything for their country. Operational reality. You're a 2-3-year-old in Belfast at a checkpoint, and suddenly a car surges toward you. You have 2 seconds to decide. Is it a suicide bomber or a confused civilian? You make the call, you live with it. Now, 50 years later, a prosecutor who wasn't there applying laws that didn't exist at the time, is going to judge whether you made the right choice. Veterans aren't concerned about theoretical legal protections. They are worried about political prosecutors, ideological activist lawyers, and the legal system treating combat operations as if they were ordinary law enforcement. Here's something that Starmer either doesn't understand or refuses to acknowledge. Even if charges never stick, even if a veteran is eventually cleared, the process itself is the punishment. Legal costs run into hundreds of thousands of pounds, life savings wiped out, homes remortgaged, families bankrupted, reputations permanently damaged, names splashed in newspapers, neighbors who have known you for decades suddenly wondering if you're a monster. The psychological trauma is profound. Imagine being 72, believing you'd made peace with the horrors you faced during the Troubles, and now being dragged back, forced to relive the worst moments, defending choices made as a barely grown teenager. This isn't justice, it's cruelty dressed up as accountability. And those driving these prosecutions know full well what they are doing. Even those cases that don't succeed have achieved their objective, punishing veterans, discouraging serving soldiers, and rewriting history to cast British forces as aggressors rather than defenders. The Conservative Legacy Act had already been ruled in breach of the European Convention on Human Rights, meaning any law strong enough to protect veterans will likely face legal challenges. Labour's current approach attempts to thread a needle offering some protections while satisfying human rights obligations. But those who served, who know the realities of Northern Ireland, say it fails in practice. Protections are vague, dependent on prosecutorial discretion, and highly vulnerable to political influence. That is why the SAS Regimental Association is taking this seriously, preparing a judicial review to challenge the legislation in court. When one of the world's most respected special forces units calls your law dangerous nonsense, that's not something you can spin away in a press release. These are people with expertise, resources, and overwhelming public support. Recent polling shows 68% of Britons oppose prosecuting veterans for Troubles-era actions, and even among Labour voters, support is weak. The government knows it is a political minefield, yet it proceeds. Partly because of promises to Northern Irish political parties, partly due to ideological commitments to human rights law, and partly because reversing course now would admit a catastrophic error. Herein lies the tension. The families of victims do deserve answers. Some have been waiting 40, even 50 years for inquests that were abruptly canceled. Mothers who never learned how their sons died. Fathers who never confronted those responsible. From their point of view, justice may be delayed, but it is not denied. Yet for the veterans, it is political prosecution dressed up as accountability. These soldiers followed rules of engagement approved by the government, obeyed orders from commanders with political authority, and faced terrorists who operated without rules, hiding among civilians, bombing pubs, murdering children. Decades later, they're being judged by people who weren't there, under laws that didn't exist at the time, in a political climate that treats moral equivalence between soldiers and terrorists as sophisticated thinking. One veteran put it bluntly, "We were sent to do an impossible job under impossible rules, and we did it. We stopped a civil war. We prevented massacres, and now we're being told we're the villains." The European Convention on Human Rights adds another layer of complexity. Laws strong enough to truly protect veterans will almost certainly face legal challenges, while laws weak enough to satisfy human rights lawyers provide little real protection. It may be that there is no solution that fully satisfies either side. Then, of course, there is the involvement of the Republic of Ireland. Under this new framework, Irish authorities will have a say in investigations of British forces. To many veterans, this is the final insult. The government of Ireland never fully confronted IRA terrorism during the Troubles, offered sanctuary to operatives across the border, and made extradition difficult. Now, they may judge the very soldiers who fought that terrorism. This isn't just about individual cases. It's about sovereignty, national legal authority, and the future of Britain's military. If we cannot protect veterans of the Troubles, why would anyone volunteer for service in Iraq, Afghanistan, or future conflicts? Legal jeopardy that never expires, political winds that can shift decades later. Who would step forward? Here's where we stand. A prime minister who has never worn a uniform is telling some of Britain's most decorated soldiers that they are wrong about their own safety. 8 four-star generals, an air chief marshal, and the SAS Regimental Association are saying this legislation is dangerous. Veterans who once fought terrorism are now preparing to fight their own government in court. Starmer says, trust the system. The SAS says, the system is broken. Someone is right, someone is wrong. And Britain's ability to defend itself, recruit elite soldiers, and operate in hostile environments may hinge on which side prevails. This isn't about the past, it's about the future. It's about whether Britain stands by the people who stand for Britain, or whether service and sacrifice mean nothing when political winds shift. So what do you think? Should soldiers who fought IRA terrorists in the 70 seconds and 80 seconds face prosecution today? Or is Labour correct in reopening these cases to bring justice. Share your opinion in the comments below. The debate matters, and so does your voice. If you want to see the outcome of this legal battle, how the judicial review plays out, and whether Starmer backs down or doubles down, then subscribe and turn on notifications. This fight is just beginning and we'll be covering every development. Don't miss a single move.